Hello. Welcome to the Global Network of Psychologists for Human Rights Roundtable Introduction and Discussion. I am Mary Bullock, one of the co-chairs of the steering committee of the Global Network, or the GNPHR. Along with my fellow co-chair, Polly Hagenars, we want to welcome you to this introduction to the GNPHR. What you will hear is a recording of members of the steering committee talking about the network, its founding, its goals and aspirations, and also about the importance of bringing psychology to human rights and bringing human rights to psychology. This will be followed by some comments by some of the members of the Advisory Council of the GNPHR. We hope that you will listen, that you will be inspired and energized, and that you will join in the discussion of how to bring psychology to human rights and how to bring human rights to psychology as we help to create a voice for us all. We also hope that you will subscribe to the Global Network, and we look forward to welcoming you there. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. My name is Polly Hagenars, and I'm living in Amsterdam, the Netherlands. And I'm one of the members of the steering committee of the Global Network of Psychologists for Human Rights.
My name is Tony Wainwright. I live in England and I'm a member of the steering committee as well. And I'm on the a group within the British Psychological Society on Psychology and Human Rights.
Hi, my name is Marlena Plavšić. I'm from Croatia, and I'm also the member of the steering committee in this global network. I'm also the member of the section of Psychologists and Human Rights in the Croatian Psychological Society.
Hi, my name is Amy Karam. I'm a clinical psychologist. I am from Beirut, Lebanon, and I am one of the members of the steering committee.
Hi, I'm Ellison Santos. I'm a clinical psychologist from Brazil. I live near São Paulo, and I'm also a member of the steering committee of the Global Network of Psychologists for Human Rights.
Hello, I'm Mary Bullock. I live in the United States, and I'm also a member of the steering committee of the Global Network of Psychologists for Human Rights. Welcome to information about the Global Network of Psychologists for Human Rights.
The inherent, inalienable dignity of every person, of all persons, is the universal basic value of human rights. Human rights are critical to psychologists' mission of contributing to the well-being of humanity. The Universal Declaration of Human Rights provides considerable inspiration for psychology and a normative framework for psychologists and their associations. Not all psychologists, nor all psychologist associations are aware of the beneficial power of the United Nations UDHR, was accepted in Paris in 1948. The Global Network of Psychologists for Human Rights connects psychologists all over the world to support and promote psychologists' mission for the well-being of all of humanity. And given the reality of an increasingly polarized world, rapidly changing landscapes, and the multiplicity of threats to humanity, a human rights-based and oriented psychology is needed now more than ever. Many authors have called for a commitment. Among them are the Frenchman Stéphane Hessel, former member of the Resistance, and after World War II, co-editor of the Universal Human Rights Declaration. He has written at the age of 93, Indignez-vous, Time for Outrage, and engagez-vous, get involved. And his reasons for personal outrage include the growing gap between the very rich and the very poor, the treatment of illegal immigrants, the need for a free press, the need to protect the environment, and he calls for a peaceful and non-violent insurrection. Also Hannah Arendt, who has written extensively about human fundamental and civil rights. She wrote, "The right to have rights need to be given. We as psychologists can and must contribute to the dignity, the freedom and the connection of all of humanity."
The Global Network of Psychologists for Human Rights wants to address the need to get involved and the need to focus psychology on human rights issues. Its first activity has been to develop a web resource where we can collectively learn about human rights documents, human rights organizations, education, and events. The goal of the web resource is to be a forum for discussion and action through discussion blogs, action alerts, and a monthly newsletter. We'll tell you more about the content that we have been developing in a minute. The Global Network of Psychologists for Human Rights is a collaboration across many countries and many people. It was founded as a collaboration between the International Council of Psychologists and the European Federation of Psychologists Associations Human Rights Board. And it is managed by a steering committee. You've met us earlier in this presentation, and also a global advisory council that spans the world. And of course, the real substance of the global network is the subscribers, all of you who will join together to have a collective voice.
And here are some updates of what the Global Network has done. We have developed some blog series where you are going to find some texts and articles about human rights and psychology. We also have a newsletter that you will be receiving, and also some content areas that we have established, and we are creating some resources to educate us about human rights and its integration with psychology, such as climate change, COVID-19, psychology and human rights education in psychology, LGBTQ+, migration, displacement, personal data, data rights, and youth, and others that are about to come.
So I'm going to talk about human rights education and update you with what we have on our website. When I think about education, I would say it's the single most influential factor in the society, because it helps shaping attitudes and consequently actions. And what we need in the field of human rights is really actions. In shortest, education for human rights is about preventing violations of human rights. When we talk about human rights education today, we speak about education about, through, and for human rights. And for many years, it has been neglected in our formal education as psychologists. And now we are working very hard in overcoming this gap. So this part of the website is filling you or whoever is interested with the resources that can provide information about all kinds of educational material, resource material, conferences, and so on. You can also contribute and give us some insights about what you have been doing, what kind of education you provide, what kind of education you attended, and you find very helpful for your work as psychologists. On the next slide, I'm very happy my task here was very easy because this year, however awkward this year has been, but it brought us something very special. There was no books on this topic before. And in this year, 2 books were released. They are considered handbooks because they provide psychologists, they are targeted to psychologists, and they provide us with some very basic knowledge, but also not basic, but very specified in some fields. So the book that was released first in spring was edited by 5 editors, Polly Hagenars, myself, Nora Sveas, Ulrich Wagner, and Tony Wainwright. It was published by Routledge, and the title is Human Rights Education for Psychologists. The other book that was released quite recently in autumn was edited by Neil Rubin and Roseanne Flores. It was published by Cambridge University Press. The title is The Cambridge Handbook of Psychology and Human Rights. So very obviously, there are many people. Well, there are about more than 20 contributors in the first book and more than 100, I think, in the second book, which really proves that something like this, the literature was lacking in this field. So there is a lot to be read and to be learned. So I'm really happy to advertise for both books. And the people who contributed in both books are also, many of them are members of this global network. On the next slide, you can see something else that we put on the website. It's the special issue of the journal European Psychologist that was issued last year. And it was dedicated to human rights and psychology. The guest editors for that issue were Kerstin Söderström, Polly Hagenars, Tony Wainwright, and Ulrich Wagner. And the content covers all kind of topics related, of course, to human rights linked with psychology. We were very happy and lucky to have had an intern, psychology intern, Andrea De Palma, who did his internship at the University of Utrecht under the supervision of Professor Felisa Tibbits. And he helped in collecting some very valuable stories and data. And he published a report that is available on the website about the experiences of psychologists who do teach human rights, either as courses or cross-curricula on the universities on various levels of studying. And you can find, I find it extremely inspirational when I read about the colleagues teaching and what they learn and how it inspires them for keeping the course and the subject and how students react. It's a really nice source for motivation. And the most recent thing that is on the website, it's a project that was developed mainly by Professor Tibbets with 2 organizations, Generation Human Rights and Human Rights Education Associates. You can find it, you can download it for free from their websites. It's called Unmasking, the Pandemic Curriculum Project that is targeted to young people through 4 modules about their experiences with COVID-19 this year. So this shows how education can result from an action and can inspire for actions as well.
Hello, I am Ava Thompson, and I bring you greetings from the Bahamas. I am an associate professor at the University of the Bahamas, where I integrate human rights in my teaching, and I use a human rights-informed approach at the Bahamas Institute for Child and Adolescent Mental Health, where I am the executive director. As a steering committee member of the Global Network of Psychologists for Human Rights, it is truly a pleasure to bring a brief message. Psychology's formal relationships with human rights is relatively young, but the fundamental linkages between the 2 fields are indisputable. Further, they can and must be strengthened as a way of promoting humanity's well-being. It is imperative that we integrate human rights into our efforts to address historical and contemporary challenges of the 21st century and to build a better world for all. The human rights framework provides a critical means for psychology to fulfill its promise to humanity, as it is another source of unity and thus strengthens our capacity for collective action. The Global Network of Psychologists for Human Rights provides a wonderful opportunity for psychologists of all specialties to learn more about human rights, learn how they can integrate it into their professional activities and personal lives, and finally become engaged in effecting change in our local, national, regional, and global contexts. We look forward to exciting developments and to having you join us on this journey. Thank you and be well.
Greetings to you all. My name is Thuleni Sodi. I am a clinical psychologist and also a professor of psychology at the University of Limpopo in South Africa. I am a member of the Global Network of Psychologists for Human Rights. Coming from a country with a very long history of human rights abuses as a result of a racist and segregationist regime, I have throughout my social and professional life actively participated in our people's daily struggles against all forms of injustice. These struggles were not only against physical oppression, but were also aimed at liberating African people from mental oppression and slavery. As a psychologist, I definitely have a critical role to play in this noble struggle against oppression. And therefore, I also strongly and firmly believe that psychology as an academic discipline and as a profession has a critical role to play in promoting good human rights. I thank you.
Hi, I'm Shamsul Haq, a steering committee member of the Global Network of Psychologists for Human Rights. I'm originally from Bangladesh, studied psychology at the University of Dhaka. Later, I went to the University of Bristol in the UK to conduct research for my PhD on autobiographical memory and identity. After teaching psychology at the University of Dhaka for almost a decade, I moved to Malaysia. I'm currently living in Kuala Lumpur and teaching psychology at Monash University, Malaysia. After working 3 years for the International Islamic University over here, I joined the Malaysian campus of Monash University, where I founded the psychology department. I have been active in research throughout my academic career. One part of my research focuses on the trauma, memory, and mental health of refugees and other displaced populations. I joined the Global Network of Psychologists for Human Rights in 2019 because this organization advocates the application of psychology to promote human rights. I was particularly fascinated by this organization's effort to bring both practicing and academic psychologists together from all over the world who are interested in exploring how the concept of human rights is used in psychological research and practice. One important aspect of this organization is that it is well represented by psychologists from both developed and developing nations. In my role as a steering committee member, I would like to encourage psychologists from the Asian regions to join this network who are particularly interested to apply psychological theories, principles, and research findings to promote human rights. Thank you very much.
This is Polly Hagenaars. I'm the co-chair of the Global Network of Psychologists for Human Rights. Now you will hear some of the members of the Advisory Council of the Global Network of Psychologists for Human Rights.
Hi everyone, I'm Dr. Saima Iman, Advisory Council member of Global Network of Psychologists for Human Rights from Pakistan. I'm an assistant professor at Department of Applied Psychology, Lahore College for Women University, and I'm also a chartered member at the British Psychological Society. I have many interests regarding human rights, such as women's rights, children's rights, poverty, informal adoptees, but my main interest is environmental psychology. What contributes to people's attitudes towards environment, their pro-environmental behaviors. This is a picture that I took, a live picture of garbage being burned by unsupervised street children just outside my bedroom window. And this smoke lingers on in the night. It makes me very depressed and I'm unable to breathe. So I think this is a basic human right to breathe clean air, to live in clean environment. So here you can see this is a gutter in Lahore where I live, and this has been open gutter since my childhood days, and nobody has tried to cover it. And this is water pollution. Children and youngsters, they swim in this water in summers and they get skin diseases. And this is land and water pollution in Karachi and even in Lahore. So garbage is lying around people's houses. It is ultimately burned by street children, and people have complained about it in the media, but no action is being taken. I am raising awareness in different Facebook groups, and I'm also conducting an environmental psychology project on eco-grief, eco-anxiety, environmental identity, and pro-environmental behavior. So I'm investigating if environmental knowledge contributes to eco-anxiety, eco-grief, and pro-environmental behaviors, or there is anything else that contributes towards it. So I hope to make an impact through my research on environmental psychology, because I believe that this is a basic human right to breathe clean and fresh air and to live in clean environment. Thank you for listening. Take care. Bye-bye.
Hello, everyone. My name is Dr. Masahiro Minami. I'm a member of the Global Network of Psychologists for Human Rights Advisory Council. I am from the unceded traditional territories of the Squamish, Tsleil-Waututh, and Musqueam nations, on which the city of Vancouver, British Columbia, Canada is located. My focus is mental health and psychosocial support services in post-war conflict and genocide communities, specifically in the Republic of Rwanda. A human rights issue is important to psychology because the issue of dignity is a deserved scope of psychological science.
Hello friends, greetings from Allahabad, India. This is Rama Tripathi. I'm a member of the Global Network of Psychologists who work for human rights. I'm an emeritus professor of psychology at the University of Allahabad. I also worked for some time as director of one of the social science institutes in town called G.B. Pant Social Science Institute. I'm presently associated with an institute which is called Swaraj Vidyapeeth. Swaraj Vidyapeeth is a very unique institute because it's pledged itself to take forward the unfinished work of Mahatma Gandhi. It believes that the rights of the collectives, particularly in India, they have been trampled over by the corporates which have entered India from all over the world. It has taken upon itself to work for securing the rights of the poor the rights of the tribal. And right now, it's involved in securing rights related to jobs, rights related to their livelihood, rights related to their food. And another agenda which they have is to see that their health security is not compromised. In doing these interventions, various psychological processes are taken into consideration. That's one job which our global network has been very concerned with. I look forward to sharing whatever work which we have been able to do here, which can help securing rights for the collectives everywhere around the world. Becoming human should be our goal, not only remaining human. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Neil Rubin, and I'm speaking to you from Chicago, Illinois, in the USA. I'm on the Advisory Council of the Global Network of Psychologists for Human Rights. Well, my interest in human rights actually started in childhood. Now, I know that may sound like a cliche coming from a psychologist, that it all started in childhood, but it's really true in my case. As a boy, I had a wonderful aunt who introduced me to the institutions of culture throughout New York City. We listened to the world's great orchestras, and she introduced me to the United Nations and human rights. My aunt and my mother were great admirers of Eleanor Roosevelt, and this all made quite an impression on me as a boy. After becoming a psychologist some years later, I had the opportunity to join a team of psychologists representing the American Psychological Association, consulting on human rights issues at the United Nations. We're bringing psychological science to the global agenda at the UN and trying to inform psychologists more about the global agenda at the UN. More recently, I've had the honor of serving as the chair for the Committee on Scientific Freedom and Responsibility at the American Association for the Advancement of Science, where we work to promote the work of science and scientists in the service of human rights. Also, in the last year, my colleague, Dr. Roseanne Flores, and I have published a book, the Cambridge Handbook of Psychology and Human Rights, in which we bring together over 100 experts from around the world, from the widest range of disciplines within psychology, to show how the basis of psychological science combined with a foundation in human rights provides an opportunity for psychologists across disciplines to be able to advocate for and promote human rights. Here is our book, and I hope you will take a look at it at some point. So thank you very much for listening.
I'm Uli Wagner. I'm a retired professor of social psychology at the Philipps-Universität Marburg in Germany. My research areas are intergroup relations, aggression, and violence. And you can imagine that in that context, I have to face a lot of human rights violations. I'm especially interested in prevention of discrimination and violence. And in that context, human rights give a good normative perspective in which way research and intervention can contribute to an improvement of our society.
Hi, I'm Kirby Humanik. I'm speaking to you from the traditional ancestral territories of the Squamish, Musqueam, and Tsleil-Waututh people in what is now known as Vancouver, Canada. Before I became a psychologist, I was active in Amnesty International, and I worked in human rights organizations for refugees, survivors of torture, and political violence. This work helped me understand the power of psychological healing as a form of personal and political resistance to oppression. My recent focus as a training director in an internship program has been to articulate the connections between psychology and human rights for students and within our professional organizations. I served on the APA Task Force for Human Rights, and you can check out our final report online. The Global Network of Psychologists for Human Rights is a place for us to experience international connections and work together in solidarity. And I hope you'll join us.
Thank you so much for listening to our stories and to listening about the Global Network of Psychologists for Human Rights. Please join us. You can find more information at this URL. Thank you so much for listening.
The message that I would like to convey here is really how psychology and the global network can raise awareness on motivate action and bringing the community of psychologists together and to have an impact on raising and defending human rights. Thank you.